Welcome to the Blonde Runner podcast with Coach Laura Erickson, where she shares her healthy living tips as a running and triathlon coach and mother of 4.
Hello friends, it's Coach Laura Erickson here. I just wanted to connect. This is March, the month of March. There's a lot of things celebrated this month, but one of the ones I wanted to focus on today was brain injury awareness. This is something that's near and dear to my heart since I have suffered 2 concussions, and I did want to talk about particularly concussions. There's a lot of different types, of course, of brain injury, but this one seems to be more common in sport, and I wanted to just talk about my experiences. And unfortunately, I was hoping this wouldn't be something I would ever have to talk about, right? But we never expect things to happen, and so accidents do happen. So I wanted to explain kind of what my situation was. So my first concussion happened at USA Triathlon Nationals in Vermont in 2012. It was in August, and I had already participated the year before. I had come back to participate again, and it actually happened on the swim. I was swimming, and actually it wasn't at the beginning of the swim. Usually the beginning of the swim is pretty busy, but for me, it actually happened about, maybe halfway through the swim. I had somebody swim over me. I'm assuming it was a guy, very aggressive, and I believe I was kicked in the back of the head. I do remember being swam over, and then I remember the pain of it being kicked in the back of the head. Luckily, I do not get knocked out easily, because that could have been a life or death situation, obviously, and out there, not at the beginning. They always have a lot of people at the beginning, but I have no idea why somebody decided to swim over me versus around me, but oftentimes the waves behind you will catch up, and then, so I was swam over, kicked in the back of the head. I remember feeling really confused. I remember looking around and going, what just happened? Kind of, where am I at? And then I really don't remember any much after that, except I do remember hitting my arm. We had sort of a dock we were going out of, and there were cement sides to it with like bumpers and plastic or, rubbery bumpers. And I remember hitting my arm on it and looking up. My husband actually has a picture of me. He was there, and I didn't look like myself. It was really awkward, and I don't remember anything about transition. I remember next thing I remember in that race was cycling. I had just did the turnaround on the bike. It was an Olympic distance event. So with Olympic distance, that's a 40K, which is nearly 25 miles, just a little short. And so I was at least 12 miles in, and I think I must have come to, in a way, at that point, because when I had gotten there, we had driven the route on the bike, and I remember thinking to myself, okay, when I get to this point, I'm going to just check my positioning and really start pushing it, since it was over halfway. So I do remember that point, and that's kind of the point on that I remember in the race. I remember getting back, and I remember doing the run, and I remember feeling incredibly nauseous. I didn't feel good at all on that run. And I have not had a lot of experience like that, feeling so nauseous. I just couldn't hold anything down. Wasn't really vomiting, but I just didn't want to eat, and I just felt nauseous. It was horrible. I finished. I didn't do that great. That was upsetting, but I had a headache. I just didn't feel good. I didn't feel like myself. And I remember, telling my husband I didn't feel good, and we eventually ended up going to the med tent, and they said that they thought I had a mild concussion. And so, that wasn't very fun. That was my first experience with concussion, and it seemed to subside within, a week or two. I didn't seem to have any long-term effects of that particular concussion. The next concussion that I got was, I was hit on my bicycle. It was September 27th, 2014. I was coming home from a ride in a roundabout half a mile from my house, and I was in the roundabout, and I had a truck kind of T-bone me on the side, and I fell back and, twisted my knee and everything, and hit my head really hard on the ground. I did have a helmet on. It did crack the helmet, but I immediately had a horrible headache. Obviously, I didn't feel good. I felt nauseous. I twisted my knee. I hurt my back. I mean, I obviously that was not fun. Luckily he wasn't going full speed or anything. That helped a lot. But that was my second concussion. So nothing I expected. One thing I would like to say is I am a very cautious rider, and it's hard to have that happen to you. Obviously, I had a lot of post-traumatic stress from that, and I have actually had to have 2 surgeries on my knee since, and I'm still dealing with some of the stuff. But for the most part, I did walk away from that. And I will say I am a cautious rider, and I'm not saying or sharing these stories to make you feel like, oh no, I could get a concussion in the swim, or I could get a concussion in the bike. I honestly think that my situations were probably more rare than common, of course. And so I wouldn't say this is like triathlon is a really dangerous sport or anything, but I think especially cycling, you just have to be very aware of people around you. And even if you are aware, just assume that they don't ever see you. And, I think in this instance for me, I had really no control of what was happening, or I think it would have happened regardless. I was very aware, yet, it was all slow motion before he hit me. I knew it was going to happen. It was an awful experience, but I will say accidents happen. So one of the products that I use and I have, and luckily I don't knock out easily, so I didn't lose any consciousness. Often with concussion, you do lose consciousness, and I will read through the symptoms of this, but I have something on at the time I had it on my ankle, but I actually have one that's on my watch now, and it's called Road ID. Basically, it lets you put your name and number or contact information. So if you ever were out, you didn't know, obviously they didn't know who you were, they could still contact somebody. So I highly, highly encourage you to get a Road ID. I do have a discount code. You can go to my website, blonderunner.com, and I have a lot of discounts. And these are the stuff that I really love and use, and I highly, highly encourage it. If you use the code RUNBLONDE, RUNBLONDE, then I just highly encourage you to get either wristband. I have one that goes directly on my watch, but it's identification. If I were knocked out, I would definitely want my family to be contacted, especially if it's a goodbye situation. Like, I didn't expect it to happen. You never know when accidents do happen. And yeah, we don't want them to happen. We want to be cautious. We want to take every precaution. But if something did happen, it'd be nice if you were able to be contacted. They also have ones for, like, if you're allergic to medications or you're diabetic, or that's really good information. And health professionals are trained to look for those identifiers. So highly, highly, highly encourage you to get that. Back to concussion. So for me, I immediately had a headache. I felt super nauseous. I was a bit dizzy. I just, obviously it was quite an experience. And I would say when you've suffered a concussion, sometimes you can get a concussion and you don't know you have it for a little while. But a lot of times you'll know right away. There are different sports that are more prone to injury. And I know for me, I had been doing martial arts at the time, and I decided to stop doing martial arts because once you get one concussion, it's easy. You're more prone to get another one more easily. And so I just don't want my brain injured. And I will say the first concussion wasn't too bad, but I did, obviously that probably made me even more susceptible to the next one that I got. And that one was a lot more severe. Of course, I slammed my head on the ground really hard, luckily having a helmet. But I will say I immediately had a headache. I had a headache for at least probably 10 more months solid. I did go to the doctor. They honestly didn't check me super good. They should have done better. And have I ever experienced it again? I mean, you don't know really what to do, right? When you first experience something like that, you don't have all the tools. I would have insisted they take an x-ray and do the things that they didn't do. He barely checked me and said, well, it's just going to take time to heal. But, and I think they believed I had a concussion, of course. And let me go through the symptoms of concussion. Let's hope that you don't ever have it. But if you're listening in and you have kids in sports, that there's a potential for concussion, potential to hit your head on something hard or jolt your head. People can get concussion from accidents, like on the road in their car. But some of the symptoms, and this is even a mild. So I had a mild concussion. There are obviously much more severe brain injuries, but it's nonetheless not fun. Physical things are you're bothered by light or noise. That unfortunately doesn't always go away. For me, I sometimes will get something called overstimulation. I remember actually I do running, like I often do triathlon clinics for different races, and one particular one, we were doing the ride together for the race and just previewing it. One gal had had a concussion before, and we actually had to stop. We were on a busy road. It was too noisy for her. It was just too much. She ended up having to go on a different road, or we kind of had to help her through because it's just too much noise. She had suffered a concussion before. So sometimes that doesn't always go away right away. And sometimes it may never. You may be just susceptible to overstimulation. Easy. I know I am. That hasn't really gone away, and it's been nearly 8 years since that event. So other physical symptoms of mild TBI or concussion are dizziness. You could have balance problems. I'm grateful that mine wasn't too bad or anything on the bike. I made it through. Feeling tired, having no energy, headaches, nausea, vomiting. That's usually more early on, and then you can have vision problems. This is the problem. Some of the other symptoms is what I really noticed is thinking and remembering. I remember having problems concentrating. I know, I would try to, and even now I still have it a little bit, but I'll lose my train of thought a lot more than I ever did before. And so you feel like you're kind of in a bubble. I remember for me, it took a good 10 minutes and 10 months, I would say. And then it felt like a cloud lifted and I could think more clearly. So, not thinking clearly is part of it, like brain fog or feeling kind of groggy, just not feeling completely, like I would say feeling chipper. You just feel like you're in a cloud. Sometimes you do have problems with that short-term or long-term memory. You have trouble thinking clearly, as I mentioned. Other problems, and I already have social anxiety and anxiety, so I already had that, and so it exacerbates those problems. It can make you more nervous. I know for me, I had already had some panic attacks, and I had some more panic attacks from that. It can make you irritable, easily angered. I wouldn't say that was a problem much for me. I did feel more emotional, though. I found that sometimes I was more sad, easily more sad, or I get a little low, more depressed. And sometimes I had a hard time sleeping. And so I think a lot of people have that problem. They just have a hard time falling asleep. So it does damage your brain. And one thing I will say with obviously concussion damages your brain is you have to give it time. And I would say the best thing to help with that too is, for me, I did get approval from the doctors to go ahead and train for an Ironman. I remember it was very life-changing having that being hit and feeling, life or death situation right in front of you. And I remember it really spurred on my dedication to my sport. My first concussion in the water made me question, am I doing something that I'm going to die? I have 4 children and I don't want to die doing this. And so it kind of sucked the wind out of my sails a bit with that. But then I did face my fears and did an Omega Wave World Triathlon in San Diego the following April. So I did take a little time for myself, 5 or 6 months, and then decided I wanted to jump back in. I just miss it. I love it. It's something I enjoy doing. Of course, I don't want to die doing it, and so I take all the precautions I can. I did get the approval from the doctors to go ahead and train. I was training for my first Ironman at that time. I had done lots of triathlon distances, other distances, but within almost a year, so it was a year later in October, I completed my first Ironman. I actually thought that was really good for me mentally, to have something to train for, because when you physically or have been changed like that, and it gave me some normalcy to my life, and I was still, able to perform. I'm grateful I did that. But it was a little more challenging I had to have knee surgery and having, those issues, but I was determined to not let it stop me from doing what I love. And so I did have a lot of stress and anxiety when I first started hitting the roads riding again. And I gave myself permission to not ride outside if I couldn't. I actually set up I had 2 bikes, so I had one that I used outside and then one I could use inside, and I always had it set up on the trainer. So even if it was a beautiful sunny day, I would give myself permission to ride inside if I didn't feel like I could do it. And I did that a lot, actually, and luckily I was training for Ironman Maryland, which is a fairly flat course because I live by a paved trail, so it's not very far from my house, a mile or something. So I did have to ride through that same roundabout that I got hit, and that was really good for me too. Like, I did go to therapy a little bit, but I found exposure therapy was the best thing, is just going and riding in those same areas and having good experiences, and so that helped me get through. But I would ride on a flat paved, and that helped me so I didn't have so much anxiety, because there's certain noises, a revved truck engine will cause me to freeze up. Obviously, I have some trauma that I experienced with that noises and things will trigger it. So knowing those triggers, knowing how I can cope, I can't always control what triggers will affect me, but I can control my response to those triggers. And so I've learned how to do that. And so I'm still riding. I'm still very cautious, and you just never know when things will happen like that. And I found that there are some things that I will probably always deal with since I've had that, just that the light, being more sensitive to light and overstimulation. So I definitely encourage you to get checked if you feel like you've had a concussion or your child is in sports, that there are any of these symptoms showing up, that is something that they need to consider and hopefully get taken care of. So anyway, I would love to talk more about trauma and trauma response and how I got through post-traumatic stress, and I think those things are really important. But I just wanted to bring some awareness to concussion. It can happen. It's something that you can learn to manage the symptoms of, the things that you're suffering because of a traumatic experience like that. So just bringing more awareness. There's a lot of different resources. You can check it out online. There's a lot more severe brain injury as well. So I'm grateful that I've only experienced mild concussions. There are certainly a lot more severe concussions that can take a lot longer. For me, it took a good 10 months to really allow my brain to heal, and it did heal fully and for the most part. So other people, maybe not so lucky. Definitely some really tender stories out there. I encourage you to become aware, donate to different causes if you can, and be aware and hopefully be safe. So until next time, live well. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Healthy Living Podcast. Be sure and check the show notes for resources or links that we mentioned in the show. You can also find them on my website at blonderunner.com, BLONDERUNNER.com. You can also find me on Instagram at The Blonde Runner with an E, and Coach Laura Erickson, and that's LORA. Before you forget, I hope that you will follow this podcast and like it so you don't miss an episode. Also, it really helps if you leave a review so other people can find it, and share it with your friends. Until next time, live well.